Welcome to Bedtime Stories for Night Owls. Tonight's story is Rosebay, the Willow-herb, by Winifred Flower. High up in the sky, a group of parachutes drifted in the wind, the men they supported only visible as small swaying dots beneath. Gradually, the dots grew bigger as the great parachute umbrellas slowly sank to earth. Far below, another crowd of parachutes were airborne in the same way. But these were no giant silk mushrooms with straining ropes and belt. 16 together might cover an inch, and each was formed from the most delicate plume of threads growing from a minute seed. Hundreds of thousands of these tiny parachutes set off that September day from the parent plants of Willow-herb. They had no guide but the wind, and might be blown only a few yards, or whirled up into the sky, not to descend again for miles. Of one little group of seeds, a dozen were caught in a hawthorn bush only 20 feet away, and several more in an elm tree further off. The rest were blown on and separated. Some fell in a water meadow by a river. Others traveled on to descend in parks and gardens of a London suburb. But the last were whirled farthest of all, and slowly fell on rooftops or drifted onto rubble which, a few months before, had been houses in central London. They were tough little seeds, capable of standing up to so much hardship. One had landed in a small mud puddle among debris, where its wet parachute gradually collapsed, and it sank. There it remained all through the autumn and winter. Spring brings a stimulus to growth to all plants, and the willow-herb seed was ready. It had become more deeply buried during the winter, and its hard seed wall was softened. No rich earth surrounded it, as in the case of seeds which fell in gardens or by the river, but it was able to thrive in burnt ground better than most other plants. The grit and mud around it were at least wet, and the little seed absorbed water and swelled till its wall burst. Then its root probed downwards, acting as an anchor while the first yellowish-white leaves slowly uncurled and turned green. Until they were green, the seedling could not feed itself, for the green coloring matter uses the gases of the air, and from them and the water sent up from the roots builds up solid food. All day the leaf factories worked, making sugars and starch, and at night the food was distributed to all parts of the young plant. The seedlings' fresh leaves were quickly covered with soot, but luckily the air holes for both feeding and breathing were mostly on the under surface and remain unblocked. Other plant seeds had germinated, stunted groundsel and dandelions, and tufts of grass were helping to hide the desolate spaces between ruined walls. Sparrows hopped about, some taking delight in pecking and killing the young plants. One had just flown down to the willow-herb seedling when 2 workmen came tramping over the rubble. The sparrow, whose strong beak was already poised, flew off, while the willow-herb escaped the second threat of death in 1 minute, as a boot descended 2 inches from it. The young willow-herb quickly outstripped the others, growing tall and straight, until in early July its flower buds appeared. Those at the bottom of the long spike were ready to open first, the pink of their petals showing through the gray and green buds. But at this time another danger threatened the plant. A wandering caterpillar, desperately hungry after its walk among barren stones, attacked it. How the caterpillar came there is a mystery, but it bit into the willow-herb's leaves, chewing steadily on, hour after hour. More leaves were damaged than the plant could well spare, when one of the inquisitive sparrows hopped down. This time it was the large caterpillar which was pecked. A number of the brilliant pink spikes of flowers made the waste spaces gay, and, more important to the plants, caught the attention of the few bees and other insects flying over that area. A bee flew to the willow-herb spike and alighted on the long stamens of a wide-open flower. It went to all the flowers, collecting nectar and pollen. The bright petals withered and fell to the ground after pollination, even before the topmost buds had opened. Below each withering flower, the ovary, looking rather like a thick flower stalk, grew longer and longer. Within it, the minute seeds were forming. Each was at first so small it could not have been seen without a microscope. The seeds were arranged in 4 rows, with about 100 in each row. More and more of the long green seed boxes stretched out from the stem where the flowers had been. Throughout August, these ovaries grew longer and harder, changing from green to brown. The seeds inside ripened, and from each seed coat grew about 65 threads, radiating from a central point. In the hot September sun, the outsides of the oldest fruits became drier and drier. The seeds were all ready to be scattered. Suddenly, one split at its tip, the 4 sections curving outwards as the driest outside skin was at last able to shrink. As each part of the fruit separated, the hundreds of plumed seeds appeared, arranged rather like piles of miniature shuttlecocks. A faint breeze was blowing, and it was sufficient to raise the less than featherweight seeds into the air, where they were drawn upwards by eddies of wind. Day by day, when it was dry and sunny, more and more fruits cracked open and bent backwards to allow their seeds to be blown away. Sometimes the air was full of the tiny parachutes drifting around. Many settled fairly near their parent plant, so that next summer, instead of a few pioneer willow-herbs flaunting their bright pink against the drab background, there would be great clumps of gorgeous color. The end. Sweet dreams, night owls.